Hello and welcome to Stormont here in East Belfast, where in a very few minutes' time Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness are due to take the pledge of office, which it's hoped will usher in a new period of stable government for Northern Ireland. It's taken a long time to bring these two once mortal enemies, the DUP and Sinn Féin, together. It's cost 3,500 lives and created tens of thousands of victims. And in the course of our coverage today, we'll reflect the views of those people who've suffered most in this conflict. But today, Northern Ireland takes another small step under the watchful eye of the world's media towards a normal political and civil life. We'll cover everything that's happening at Stormont this morning, so to push that along, let's join my colleague Jim Fitzpatrick, who's in our studio in the bowels of Parliament buildings.
Yes, I'm here in our Stormont studio with Mark Davenport, our political editor. We'll be keeping you up to date with the unprecedented events here at Stormont as they unfold here today. We'll also be hearing from former ministers and previous Stormont executives, and we'll be hearing from the ministers today, the new ministers, about their hopes for the future. Mark Davenport, it is a significant day, a lot of things to unfold and a pretty tight timetable as to what's going to happen. What do you expect to see?
Well, it's a significant day, but nothing ever goes quite according to plan, and the tragic death of the DUP MLA George Dawson at the premature age of just 45 means that there's going to be a change to the timetable of events. We're expecting in the next few moments Assembly proceedings to start, but to start with an announcement of his death and then for there to be an adjournment, we think, of half an hour as a mark of respect. And then at 11 o'clock things will begin all over again, and what we were expecting to witness will then unfold, and that will be the affirmation of the pledge of office by Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness. Obviously very significant. Sinn Féin paying formal lip service now to the forces of law and order as part of that pledge of office, and then the appointment of the ministers. And watching from on high in the visitors gallery above will be Bertie Ahern, Tony Blair and Senator Ted Kennedy leading a US delegation. We've already heard from him on his way into the building.
And indeed others that we heard from earlier today were the new First Minister designate and the Deputy First Minister designate, Martin McGuinness. As they came to Stormont today, they both had things to say about events.
They did indeed. I mean, Ian Paisley really reflecting on the loss of George Dawson there said it was a sad day for his party but a special day. He hoped that this day would pave the way to peace and prosperity in the future. And Martin McGuinness maybe playing a little bit on Tony Blair's famous hand of history, said this was a day when reporters would witness history, not hype. So still a bit of alliteration going on there, but in these changed times he believes that this is really a significant day and that the new administration will now get on with the business.
Well, in fact, I think we can possibly see the scene as it is here at the moment. Currently outside the building, people are preparing for today's events. The media tents are set up, the swarm of activity that's out there. And here we see Ian Paisley arriving earlier this morning. He had a chance to talk to the media. There he is talking, and there's Martin McGuinness just arriving as well. He too, as you were saying, Mark, had some words.
We've already taken joint decisions, but that was in the context of not having power. All of that is going to change in the course of the next couple of hours, and by midday today we are going to be in charge, and we're going to be charged with the responsibility of governing in the interests of the people, and I think we do so in the belief and in the sure knowledge that we have the overwhelming support of all of the people of Ireland for what we're about to do.
Former ministers in previous Stormont executives, they were at the office of the First and Deputy First Minister, junior ministers. In there we have Dermot Nesbitt and Dennis Hockey. You're both very welcome indeed. Now, of course, everyone's talking about the historic significance of today's events. Is it a day that you can enjoy, Dermot Nesbitt, given the parties that are now in charge?
Well, actually, I listened to the Stephen Nolan show as I came in this morning, and there was a lot of mixed feeling, and I think that reflected the people who rang in. It's very good for Northern Ireland that we are having government in Northern Ireland, that people who are elected by the people of Northern Ireland are taking decisions on behalf of the people of Northern Ireland. But I am bound to say also that it is also a sad day, because we could have been there many, many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, whenever Brian Faulkner was First Minister and Gerry Fitt was Deputy First Minister. It lasted for a mere few months. And Sinn Féin and Provisional IRA weren't even on the political landscape then. They weren't even going to be in government. But there were people then who said no and continued to say no until now. In fact, Martin Manser, a senator in Dublin and also an advisor of the Taoiseachs over time, I think he summed it up quite well. He said he always thought Dr. Paisley would do the deal, but only when he was king of the castle.
Well, it is a sad day, and as Mark had mentioned earlier there, Dennis Hockey, of course, with the untimely death of George Dawson. I think the Assembly Chamber met briefly there and have now adjourned as a mark of respect to George Dawson. He was, in many respects, a rising star of the DUP and an articulate speaker, so it is a big loss for them.
It is a big loss. He was a man with considerable expertise, particularly in economics, and, well, the death of anyone is sad and tragic for his family, but it's also a big loss to his party.
And from your point of view, as someone who was there at the centre in the office of the First and Deputy First Minister, it's going to be a very different office now, considering that we have Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness.
Yes, indeed. The office of First and Deputy First Minister is often misunderstood outside political circles. And I remember there was quite a fuss, Dermot, about the numbers of staff we had and comparisons made with the office of the Prime Minister in London or even the American President. And what people were missing was the fact that the office of the First and Deputy First Minister is a functioning department of government with a wide range of departmental responsibilities. It isn't just simply the office of the leaders of the administration. It is a functioning department of government with responsibility for European policy, children's policy, the whole equality agenda, and a whole wide range of things. So necessarily it had to have the kind of disposition of staff that a functioning department of government does have. But it certainly will be a different place from the days when Dermot and I were in charge.
One key difference that we're going to see in the proceedings today is that the whole election of the First and Deputy First Minister has changed from the era that Dermot and Dennis remember, because obviously previously under the Good Friday Agreement the idea was that these two politicians would be put up as a joint ticket, and they were proposed jointly together, David Trimble and Seamus Bannon, and then David Trimble and Mark Durkan. That was meant to be a sort of symbol of partnership between the communities. Now, interestingly, obviously during the course of the St Andrews Agreement, the DUP have rewritten the rules, so you've got the First and the Deputy First Minister affirming their pledge of office, but no kind of joint ticket being proposed, which is a different style of doing things. The only thing that I would also be interested to hear what the guests make of is that in the last few weeks, because of this kind of running in period that the politicians have had, things have changed around in the sense that they have demonstrated in practice a bit of an ability to work together, perhaps more so than many people would have expected.
This is where we get an opportunity now as retired politicians to comment on the commentators. When Mark said there a moment ago, oh, this is different, it was changed in the St Andrews Agreement, true. The way they were nominated or are to be nominated is changed, but the actual working of government is the much more important thing than how they're nominated, and it remains exactly the same. Ian Paisley has said in a very triumphalist way almost that Martin McGuinness can do nothing unless I agree to it. But he doesn't add the other side of the coin. Ian Paisley can do nothing unless Martin McGuinness says so as well. And that aspect of joined at the hip, the First and Deputy First Minister as equal, not as one subservient to the other, remains as it was. In fact, the basic architecture of the workings of governance now, from today onwards, is the same as it was under the Belfast Agreement. Indeed, accountability as well, if we were allowed even to get into it, is exactly the same.
And indeed, Dennis Hockey, that point, Ian Paisley has been keen recently to refer to his deputy, and he refers to Martin McGuinness as his deputy, but the two have equal status and equal power in many respects.
Well, I think one of the mistakes in the Good Friday Agreement was to, the nomenclature of calling the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister. In many ways, the Deputy First Minister is co-equal with the First Minister, and therefore to call him the Deputy is factually incorrect. But that's the nomenclature that was chosen, and we have to live with that. But Dermot is quite right. Ian Paisley may say, as he does, that Martin McGuinness can do nothing without his agreement, but the reverse is also true.
And Mark, you did say that in some respects the two men have demonstrated in their joint press conferences in the last few days that they can work together, that it is very much a joint office, but yet you still have these problems about will there be a handshake and does that become an issue? Have they done enough do you think, to get rid of all of that?
Well, certainly in terms of the initial period, I mean, Ian Paisley has said, you're quite right, that he's not going to engage in what he calls sham shakes. But in the initial period, the fact of the matter has been is that both these politicians have pretty good people's skills, and they have been getting on okay. And those who have met them, civil servants, other politicians, have actually remarked on the sort of good humour of these joint meetings, and that all is going pretty well. The question will be, what will happen when they start hitting the issues which divide them? To some extent, they've been able to park the constitutional issue which divides them, because that's part of this overall agreement. But they will nevertheless, when they get into all the different issues, be it education, be it the handling of the economy, whatever it is, there will be times and places when these parties will pull in differing directions. So how will they handle that? And that's really only something that we'll be able to tell in the sort of months and years ahead.
Dermot Nesbitt, this date, the 8th of May, in fact, in 2001, 8th of May, David Trimble threatened that he would resign in July if the IRA hadn't begun decommissioning. Well, we all know that they didn't. He did. They now have decommissioned. Do you think those kind of hiatuses, the current, each drama unfolding is now over? Are we going to see 4 years of stable government?
Well, we're going to see 4 years of government. Whether it's stable or not is quite another matter. What I find interesting, I listened and watched BBC News yesterday, and there were 2 news items, one followed the other. The Northern Ireland element said, we're going to have government working together, 2 parties, the 2 ones in the extremes now working together, and this is a good sign for stability. The very next news item, it went to Scotland, where it said yesterday that the Scottish National Party was not going to form a coalition with the Lib Dems, and the Lib Dems gave the reason being that they could not form a government with a party that was for independence while they were for the Union. And this is something that will have to remain to be seen. There will be, as Mark rightly says, the nuts and bolts of government, because there are only 3 things that matter in government: cash, cash and cash. And whether or not they get enough more money from the Chancellor, or whether or not they shift money from one department to another, and then you put on top of all those things on a daily basis this drive that Sinn Féin has stated that all will be conditional upon working for the ultimate aim of Irish unity. Martin McGuinness had a press conference in Letterkenny, Southern Ireland, where he said one of his key political objectives would be cancer care for northwest of this island. Now, I don't know where that fits in with Michael McGimpsey, and these will be the tensions.
We shall keep a close eye on them. That's our job in the press. And among the guests arriving today is a delegation driven by George Bush, and head of that delegation, in many respects, is the Senator Ted Kennedy, brother of the late President. And here he is talking to the media just as he arrived earlier.
Yeah. This is an extraordinary example that Northern Ireland is really showing to the world, that you can disband militias and private armies, you can put aside the bomb and the bullet, and through political reconciliation, hopefully carry forward the hopes and dreams of a people. My wife Vicky and I are...
General Speaker, totally reliant on yourself as to what's happening. And there we can now see, just outside Parliament buildings at the moment, is the Secretary of State with the current Speaker, Eileen Bell, who in a few moments, of course, will soon give up that office and hand over the reins to another Speaker. We expect, of course, it will be the DUP MLA, Willie Hay. The Secretary of State yesterday signed the order paper restoring devolution from midnight tonight, Mark. He said never has a politician so gladly given up his power. Do you think he meant it?
Well, I think he did, because he obviously hopes that this will go down as a big success on his book. He's obviously in the running for the deputy leadership, and he can move on to something else. So I don't think he's particularly wanting to hold on to the reins of power. Indeed, he was quite glad to be evicted from his office in Stormont Castle previously in response to a demand from Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness. So certainly he's hoping that everything goes smoothly from now on in, and you know, this is a big day for him.
Now, former BBC colleague, your predecessor, Stephen Grimison, who's now in charge of media affairs up here, explaining presumably what's going to happen next.
He's telling them to get a move on, maybe, I don't know. But yes, we see Eileen Bell. It's the final day in her tenure. We were expecting, as you said, the DUP's Willie Hay to be confirmed as Speaker. And after some sort of last-minute nerves, it now looks like we will get 3 deputy speakers elected as well. Francie Malloy of Sinn Féin, David McClarty, the former Ulster Unionist Chief Whip, and probably Auburn McGuinness for the SDLP, and there was some sense that Jim Wells was going to hang on in that deputy speakership, but that seemed to have all been resolved yesterday.
Well, of course, the restoration order has been signed, and today, historically, in many respects, a significant one. 1660, we'll just talk over the bleeps there for a moment, maybe they want rid of us, but 1660 was the day that Charles II was confirmed as the true king, so it is actually, historically, the actual day of restoration.
Of course, that represented the victory of the Cavaliers over the Roundheads, whereas in this system we have the Cavaliers and Roundheads in mandatory coalition, which Dermot would no doubt object to, but that's the way that the system works.
I'm just smiling, it's the BBC going really back in history. We used to talk about remember 1690, here you are remembering 1660.
Well, you know, you ought to pick your starting point somewhere. Do you think the Cavaliers and the Roundheads will have a happy Parliament?
Well, they used to say that they...
sorry, Dennis, we'll just interrupt you there. We can see now the Prime Minister just arriving there, and his entourage. We'll hopefully maybe be able to hear from Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern shortly.
They're in the same car arriving there at the building, so that shows very much a sort of joint ticket that they've been running on so far as the Northern Ireland process is concerned, being greeted there by Eileen Bell and Peter Hain.
Kisses from Eileen Bell, none between Bertie and Peter Hain, but a very warm relationship between these two premiers, and all the tributes we've heard, even in terms of Tony Blair recently. Bertie Ahern's been mentioned alongside it. The two men have worked together over that 10-year period, and I suppose that has been quite unique to have two men in office together like that.
And it's a very interesting period in terms of both their careers. Obviously, Tony Blair, we're expecting him in a couple of days to confirm his departure from 10 Downing Street. Bertie Ahern at a very different juncture, fighting what's proving to be a very difficult election campaign down in the south, but he'll be almost looking forward today as a chance to get out of the maelstrom of Dublin and all the questions about his personal finances, and instead to benefit a little bit from the hand of the history in the midst of an election campaign.
We'll talk about maelstrom. That's quite a crowd of people, quite an entourage with the two premiers there. In fact, I think I saw among them Jonathan Powell, his chief of staff, and Dennis Hockey. We were talking earlier about whether the civil war is over, if you like, if the Cavaliers and Roundheads are going to work together well. Obviously, the two premiers are here today to observe others taking charge, and that's what they hope will happen.
They used to say that the Cavaliers were romantic but wrong, and the parliamentarians and the Roundheads were repulsive but right. So we leave aside the question of which of the two, between Sinn Féin and the DUP, which description applies to which. But certainly today has to be a day of hope. We were talking earlier about whether or not this coalition could survive the inevitable hard questions that will come up. I suspect that the dynamic which drove the two sides to this agreement, which takes effect today, will also drive them to find agreement when the hard issues come up. Because, in effect, neither side, the DUP or Sinn Féin, have anywhere else to go. And if the two of them have done nothing else, perhaps they have, in this generation, exhausted that savage antagonism which existed between the two sides in the north, and that savage impulse each to wreak vengeance on the other. If they have exhausted that and proven to their own satisfaction that the only way we can do business in this country is by partnership within the north and between north and south, then perhaps they have done us all a service, a very belated service, it has to be said, but nevertheless an inevitable and very necessary service.
Yes, I think Dennis mentions a good point there, exhaustion, because I think the people of Northern Ireland are exhausted with the political process. Ian Paisley is doing things today that unionism wouldn't have done a few years ago, and Ian Paisley said the vote he got enabled him to go further than he may otherwise have gone. And the people of Northern Ireland are so fed up with the politicians here, they're just saying, get on with the show, make this place work. And I think it's more out of exhaustion than out of political exhilaration. Again, I listened to the radio this morning, people were saying there was far more exhilaration in 1998 at the time of the referendum and the Belfast Agreement than there is today. There's just, as Dennis rightly said, an exhaustion, I believe. A lot of people are switched off, they don't give a toss, and they just want this thing to work, and they don't really mind who works it, so long as it works.
And Mark, we were talking there about the new Speaker and the new Deputy Speakers. We have 3 Deputy Speakers from different parties as well. Willie Hay, first of all, the new Speaker. What do we know about him?
Well, Willie Hay is, I think, very well liked across the spectrum politically. He's generally regarded as a gentleman. He's been a member of the DUP now for many years, representing the Foyle constituency. Most recently, he had a job there on the policing board for them. He was also, I think, this was interesting, given the kind of role he'll be playing here of being more of the middleman. He was involved in some of the talks which made great breakthroughs on behalf of the apprentice boys with nationalist residents up in Derry there. At a time when some of his colleagues in the marching orders would have sniffed at that, he took part in those negotiations. And he also, during the course of the summer, chaired some of the meetings of the, I think, the Preparation for Government Committee that became the Programme for Government Committee. So he's had a little bit of chairing there. It was maybe a wee bit of a surprise that Jim Wells, who was the DUP's Deputy Speaker, wasn't brought on, but it's generally thought to have been related to the fact that Jim Wells was a refusenik. He was one of those who actually voted against this agreement, so that's no doubt why Willie Hay has come to prominence. OK, well, we said that we would bring you what some of the new ministers had to say, and of course, top of the pile are the First and Deputy First Ministers, Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness. So let's hear what they have to say about today's events.
I am looking forward to the challenge of it, and our job will be to undo the mistakes of people who were really only squatters in our country, who came in and ran out again. And Northern Ireland is left in a bad way economically, in a bad way educationally, in a bad way across the whole political arena, and we have a very difficult job to do. And then we have the British government being mean, as well as doing all these stupid things that they did. And they have left us, then they pull out, and they're going to leave us to clean up the mess, but not give us the tools to do it. So this is not going to be an easy job. And I know there's great feeling in the country, and there's a great uplift, and people think, well, and we have best of wishes from all sections of the community, which is very gratifying. But that's not going to change things. And we have a very stern job of work.
I don't think anybody thinks that I'm Ian Paisley's deputy, but I think that the terminology was unfortunate, and it was unfortunate that Seamus Mullen agreed to that. I'm not in the least concerned about it, because I think that by this stage people know that Ian Paisley and I are effectively joint ministers overseeing this institution, and obviously have equal powers, which is of critical importance. So essentially, if we're to move forward in this process, then there's 2 ways of going forward. One is disagreement after disagreement after disagreement, or seeking agreement after agreement after agreement. And I'm going down the second route of seeking agreement. And here we are. You know, we've had a number of meetings since the momentous day of the 26th of March, and things are going well. And I think that's what people out there who voted for these institutions wants to hear.
We need to sell Northern Ireland across the world, because we need to have a real boost of Northern Ireland as a place where you can do business and you can have good workmanship, and it's the place where, if you're coming to Europe and you want to get into the Union, the European Union, then Northern Ireland's a place to do it. I mean, that is a job in itself.
The people out there are getting exactly what they voted for. They voted for Ian Paisley and myself, the Sinn Féin leadership and the DUP leadership, to go into government together, to put in place the power sharing and All Ireland institutions. And we're now in the process of doing that. And I think there is, you know, even walking out on the streets and meeting people are overjoyed at these developments. And it's our job now to deliver for them.
Well, it was Martin McGuinness, of course, they're speaking, the Deputy First Minister designate, and both those men were speaking before the untimely death of George Dawson. With me is East Antrim MLA and party colleague Sammy Wilson. Sammy, a sad day for all MLAs and for your party in particular.
Very sad day. I mean, George came to East Antrim in 2003. He came at a time when we were having difficulties in the area. Two very prominent members had resigned and were fighting against us in the election, and George was brought in at the last moment. And I suppose he displayed in that election the kind of doggedness which we have seen throughout his illness, as well as in the constituency, and surprisingly to many commentators was elected as the third DUP candidate in East Antrim. And since then, even though the Assembly wasn't up and running, he worked tirelessly in the area and built up a very strong electoral base. He was elected in the second count for this Assembly, and I know that he'll be hugely missed by the party locally, by constituents who inevitably, and I always wonder if it's a kind of a contrast to how they view me, describe him as that nice man, and also by the party as well, because I mean George had a great insight into the needs of industry, and wrote some fantastic papers for the party, and of course was spokesman on that, and it was a very, very effective communicator. Held very strong views, presented them forcibly, but without causing offence or giving offence. And I'm sure that this Assembly could have used someone of his calibre, and he will be missed very, very greatly. And of course, he was a personal friend, so I will miss him very greatly just at that personal level too.
Well, we hear that the Speaker is going to resume the chair in a few moments, so I will have to let you go. But you mentioned his experience in terms of business. That is something people say often MLAs have lacking. So again, that's a loss not to have someone who had that experience of industry and business.
Yes, I mean George's knowledge was not just an academic knowledge. I mean he had very practical experience because he had worked in industry for all of his life, and so he brought that knowledge of the needs of industry, something which I think, as you say, Jim, will be very important as we grapple with the economy and trying to ensure that we have a strong economic base here in Northern Ireland. But today I look on it not just as a loss to the Assembly and a loss to the party, but a personal loss, because I found he was. I mean, politics can be a very bitchy business, but all I can say is that over the 5 years that I worked with him, he displayed all of the marks of a gentleman. I don't think I ever had a cross word with him once. Okay. And I think that that's probably unique amongst even party colleagues in your own party.
Indeed. Sammy Wilson, many thanks. Well, let's now go to outside Parliament buildings and to Noel.
Jim, thank you. The sun still shining here. You might be able to hear just the distant shouts of an anti-war protest which has begun in the wake of Tony Blair's arrival here at Parliament buildings. We said that we would reflect in our coverage the feelings of people who suffered, the people who were victims themselves, the people who lost loved ones from their families. I'm joined now by two people who were very much at the cutting edge of that suffering. Rita Morrison, who lost her daughter and son-in-law in the terrible Le Mans bombing tragedy, and Eugene Reevey, whose three brothers were shot dead by loyalists in the 1970s. What are your feelings today, Rita, about what's going on?
I feel one way happy and another way sad, because it has been a long, long time for this to come, and it has come so unexpectedly to us as people of Northern Ireland. One day we had never, 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 and the next night it seemed to me, yes, yes, yes.
Are you in favour of Sinn Féin and the DUP in government together?
Difficult to say, because Sinn Féin IRA did to me. They left my late husband and I without our lovely daughter and son-in-law. And when you ask me, am I against them, I say no, I am not. I don't hate those who did that. I do not hate them. But it's difficult to say that I would love them.
Well, did you hate them? Have your feelings changed towards them over those years?
I can't honestly say, because this will be with me until I go to the grave and join my other loved ones. My husband has departed from me, my first husband, and he died of a broken heart over the loss of his dear daughter and son-in-law, who were only a year and a half married. So everything was taken from us. and I suppose it'll never be brought back to me while I'm alive, except I've gained a little happiness in the fact that I remarried last September, and I'm loving every minute of it, and I'm very happy to say that. But I would like to think it could work. I would like to think it could, but the big question mark is, will it?
Will it? Let me turn to Eugene. Eugene, you lost your 3 brothers shot by loyalists in 1976. Your family suffered a lot of harassment in the intervening years. If only just in the last few months that the historical inquiries team came to your house and said, there was no, you weren't involved, we know you weren't involved, we're very sorry. Yeah. What difference did that make?
Well, first of all, can I say like that not only were my 3 brothers brutally murdered, but that my family suffered a campaign of blatant harassment. They suffered with collusion at the hands of the UDR and the RUC, for which the British government have apologised. And the other thing I want to say is like that this gang at Glenanne that committed these brutal murders have to be brought to justice. And secondly, Noel, recently a senior policeman has confirmed to me that the document, the intelligence document that was used to blacken me in connection with Kingsmills was certainly tampered with. And a copy of the same document given to Mr Paisley, which he read out under parliamentary privilege in the House of Commons in 1999. And finally, Noel, I would appeal to Mr Blair to stand up in the House of Commons and put paid to these Paisley lies. And finally, to apologise to the Reevy family and myself for 30 years of character assassination.
A quick word on the events today. Very quick.
Delighted to be here and to see this, but I have great reservations. I don't know how this First Minister that won't apologise for certain things.
I must interrupt you there, and Rita, thank you both very much indeed. We're going back to the workings of the Assembly now.
Of devolved government in Northern Ireland today. I am mindful of the importance of today's proceedings, the level of interest in our business today, and the widespread goodwill being expressed towards our restored Assembly within and beyond our community. That goodwill is evidenced by the large presence in the gallery today of members of the public and guests, including some who have travelled from London, Dublin and the United States of America. On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to welcome all our guests here today and thank you for your interest and support, past and present. Since we last met, the Secretary of State has amended the standing orders for the Transitional Assembly that relate to signing the roll of membership. Mr Trevor Lunn has since signed the roll of membership in the presence of myself and the Clerk to the Assembly. I am satisfied that he has taken his seat in accordance with the amended standing orders, and I therefore have deemed Mr Lunn's designation...
Well, it's the Speaker of the Assembly, Eileen Bell, there is just going through some of the business, and first order of business on the agenda today will be the election of a new Speaker. So we should see in a few moments' time Willie Hay of the DUP being elected as new Speaker.
That draft standing orders were prepared by the Secretary of State, and in accordance with the legislation, these have today become the standing orders of the Northern Ireland Assembly. Each member has been provided with a personal copy. Order. The next item of business is the election of the Speaker. Under the legislation, members, I became Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly this morning. However, I do believe that it is important that the Assembly should have an early opportunity to elect a Speaker from amongst its members. I wish to remind members that the election of the Speaker will be conducted using the procedures set out in Standing Order 4 as follows. I will begin by asking for nominations. Any member may rise to propose that another member is elected as Speaker. I will then ask for the proposal to be seconded by another member, as required by Standing Order 14. If this occurs, I will then verify that the member so nominated is willing to accept the nomination. There will not be an opportunity for speeches at this stage. I shall then ask for further proposals and follow the same procedure for each. When it appears that there are no further proposals, I will make it clear that the time for proposals has passed. A debate relevant to the election may then take place, in which no member shall speak more than once. At the conclusion of the debate, or the conclusion of the nominations, if there are no requests to speak, I shall put the question that the member first proposed shall be Speaker of this Assembly. Such a vote can only be carried on a cross-community basis. If the proposal is not carried, I shall put the question in relation to the next nominee, and so on until all nominations are exhausted. Once a Speaker is elected, all other nominations will fall automatically. If that is clear, we will proceed. Do I have any proposals for the office of Speaker of this Assembly? Dr. Paisley.
Could I just say at this time that we appreciate all you have done in the past as presiding over our assemblies. And I'm sure that as you look down on these benches, you had some peculiar thoughts. Perhaps someday in writing we will be privileged to read what you thought of the people that you looked upon so carefully and affectionately. And I would like also to say that you had a difficult time. It was a difficult time for the Assembly, but you kept a grip on things. You gave the leniency that you should give, and yet you kept the standards of debate right. And we are grateful to you for that. And you can look ahead and you will have no doubts that you did well, for you had never to order anybody out of the House.
Thank you, Dr. Paisley. Mr. Adams.
Well, Bawaliam Mabwihas a Horts Ditsafosta. You did a wonderful job. I want to join Dr. Paisley in thanking you for being very, very fair in how you conducted the business here. And Tommy Gohan Sass to go away. Go Tussan Shaw Kyonan Ur Nua. I'm also very pleased that you're here to see a new start. I wish you well and your husband and family well. And Bawaliam Mara Fast to go with me go Han Bronock, Hui Bass, George Dawson, August Ma Covrone, a Horts down Chila, August Parch. I also want to say that I'm very sorry to hear about the untimely death of George Dawson, and extend to his wife and family and to his party and party leader our condolences.
Would it be in order, Madam Speaker, to join other members and on behalf of the Ulster Unionist Party to thank you for your courtesy and the manner in which you've conducted our business over some very difficult times. I would wish to place that on the record. At every occasion you extended every courtesy to us, and I know, as other members have said, how difficult we can be at times, and at all times you have kept a sense of humour and a sense of occasion, and I know we are grateful to you for carrying on well beyond the point at which you could easily have relieved yourself of the burdens of office. So I would like to identify with that. And as the last speaker has also said, to place on record our deep regret at the very sad news which is overshadowing our proceedings today of the death of one of our members, George Dawson, and to his family and his colleagues in the Democratic Party we extend our deepest sympathies. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, I want to join with leaders of the other parties on behalf of the SDLP in thanking you for your contribution in the office of Speaker. You have displayed courtesy, good character and not a little charm during what was something of a political twilight zone that we've been operating in the past number of months, and of course before that you made a very distinctive contribution in this Assembly. So you will leave your seat today with our thanks, not just for your role as Speaker, but for your contribution here as a fellow member of the Assembly. And on that note, I too want to extend sympathy to the Dawson family and to George's friends, and indeed to his party colleagues on his untimely death. George was someone who had a very distinctive economic insight to provide, and this new Assembly on this very important day will be the poorer for his absence.
Mr. Ford.
Madam Speaker, could I first of all echo the comments that were made about the passing of George Dawson, and on behalf of my party and all my colleagues express sympathy to Mrs Dawson, to his party colleagues and to the wider family circle. As Mark Durkant has just said, he made an enormous contribution even over the summer in the preparation of a government committee to preparing the ground for the economic work to be done, and we will at least have his legacy in that respect. Could I also echo the sentiments of others in expressing thanks to Madam Speaker Bell? I may have worked rather longer with Eileen Bell than others, but on this occasion I want to thank you from my colleagues for what you did. It was a thankless task to preside over the Transitional Assembly. It wasn't just members within this chamber who gave you problems at times. You were presented with problems from a wide range of circumstances, but you dealt with them all with the good humour that we know, with customary courtesy and charm, and you ensured that everything that could be done to defend the integrity of this Assembly was done. So may I thank you on behalf of all my group, and thank the staff who worked with you for what you achieved, and wish you and Derek well in the years ahead.
Hear, hear.
Those that have spoken and the leaders of the various parties have expressed personally their sympathy to the Dawson family, and I will convey this to his wife and his two daughters, and I am grateful to the party leaders and all our colleagues here for their kindness and their understanding of us at this time. Thank you.
John Purpose.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Can I just, on behalf of myself and the Progressive Unionist Party, express our condolences on the death of George Dawson. Very sorry, and we'd like to extend our sympathies to his family also. Thank you. Madam Speaker, it's been such a time for you over the last couple of years. Difficult at times, but you embraced it with your usual enthusiasm and courage. And can I just thank you on behalf of our own party and wish you very well in your retirement. I know that you'll indulge all the passions that you have, including fashion and golf and all those sorts of things, and I wish you very well for your retirement. Thank you.
Do you have any proposals for the office of Speaker?
I'd like to propose Mr. William Hay. It gives me very great pleasure to nominate Mr. Hay from the Foyle constituency to be the first elected Speaker of the Assembly. I was fitting to say some brief words about him. I just say I've known the Hay family far too long to want to remember how long ago I met him. He was a young boy in short pants at that time. He came to prominence through his mother, Anne Margaret Hay, who was the first DUP elected representative ever in County Londonderry. This is a proud day for the Hay family and in memory of their mother. At the last election, William performed a remarkable feat of topping the poll in an overwhelmingly nationalist constituency. With all due respect to my friend, the leader of the SDLP. It's not often that happens. He's regarded well by unionists and non-unionists, and I might say that we welcome the opportunity to put him forward. I must say that I acknowledge that at the next election of an Assembly, we will be supporting a candidate drawn from the other side of the House. And of course that will rest with the people because we'll be going back to the people for new mandates. But all things considered, if we do well, then we would be supporting someone from the other side of the House in the next Parliament. Thank you for your leniency.
Thank you, yes. I was lenient, but it's the day that it's in it. May I have a seconder for the nomination?
Madam Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to second the nomination of William Hay, Member of the Legislative Assembly from the Foyle constituency. The City of Londonderry has had many stout defenders in the past, and I have no doubt that William will continue to be one, but I do hope that he will not find himself...
That's a very backhanded compliment.
So a great atmosphere for all concerned in the chamber as William Hay, Willie Hay, is proposed as the new Speaker. Warm words also spoken about George Dawson, the DUP MLA who has died. Mark Devonport, our political editor, is with us. And of course the First Minister designate there, Ian Paisley, remembering William Hay when he was in short pants.
Yes, he said he'd known him as a small boy. Here's William Hay, just accepting the nomination briefly there. And interestingly also, Dr Paisley saying that in the next term of the Assembly they would support somebody from the other side, and that reflects the fact that there's been an agreement about this and they will support a Sinn Féin Speaker, presuming Sinn Féin are the largest party on the other side after the next election.
Yes, an interesting deal perhaps being done there, and this vote should go through on the nod, if you like, with an oral vote, no need to go into divisions. And now we move on to the election of the Deputy Speakers.
Of this Assembly. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary of any, no. As there are ayes from all sides of the House and there are no dissenting voices, I am satisfied that cross-community support has been demonstrated. I therefore formally declare that Mr William Hay has been elected as Speaker. But before I vacate the chair, if with some indulgence, for the last time, I would like to make a few personal remarks. When I first took up the position of Speaker, I confessed to members that I considered it rather a daunting task. Facing one's peers in such a formal and unique role brings with it many challenges, and I was anxious to ensure that I conducted myself in a manner that reflected the importance of this office. Looking back over the last year, I want to place on record my sincere thanks to members for the cooperation and goodwill that they extended to me from the outset and which has continued to this day. That goodwill has enabled us all to overcome each and every challenge. My thanks also to my two Deputy Speakers for the support they gave to me and to the Assembly as a whole. I also wish to put on record in the House my thanks and admiration for all the staff of the Assembly Secretariat. The position of Speaker offers an opportunity to observe in much greater detail the lengths to which our Secretariat officials will go to serve this Assembly, and their commitment and loyalty to me personally throughout my time in office has made my task a great deal easier. Members will know that my desire has always been to see a stable, devolved Assembly in Northern Ireland, working for the best interests of everyone in Northern Ireland. As I leave office, my hope is that today heralds the new beginning of such an Assembly, and it has been my privilege to play some small part in achieving that. While, as I have said, I consider the role of Speaker a daunting task, upon taking up the office, I took as my personal motto a paraphrase of that used by the Special Olympics movement. I hope to succeed, but if I don't, I will be brave in the attempt, and I hope that I've lived up to that standard. To this Assembly, to each of the members, and to my successor in particular, I offer my very best wishes as you set about the task for which you have been elected. I would now invite the Speaker to take the chair, and I would like to hand over the Assembly's gavel as a symbol of the office of Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly.
Well, the DUP's William Hay has now assumed the role of Speaker, and it will be straight down to business for him as the Assembly now moves on to elect the three Deputy Speakers.
The next item of business, may I take this opportunity to thank members for the electing me to the position of Speaker. As I take the chair, I am conscious of the role played by past Speakers here in the Northern Ireland Assembly, and would wish to express my own regard for the manner in which the outgoing Speaker conducted herself in what was, for all of us, an often challenging and unusual situation. I find myself in the position of being the first Speaker directly elected by the Northern Ireland Assembly. This is indeed a privilege, but a privilege that carries with it considerable burden. In electing me, members have placed their trust in me and in my ability to maintain the authority and the impartiality so essential to the office of Speaker. These values, authority and impartiality, are the values which I will strive to uphold, seeking to act at all times as a servant of the Assembly as a whole. The authority and respect for the office of Speaker is drawn from the members themselves and the cooperation which they offer to the office. I trust that respect, cooperation will be forthcoming, as it has been in the past, and that together, as an Assembly, we will fulfil the responsibilities placed upon all of us with mutual respect. To this end, we shall now proceed. Next item, business in the order paper, is the election of Deputy Speakers. Standing orders require.
So, William Hay is now moving on to the election of the Deputy Speakers. We can't quite see it, but there is a gallery in the chamber there, and sitting in the gallery now, we understand Prime Minister Tony Blair, and I think Bertie Ahern have now joined to watch proceedings unfold. They will see the election of the Deputy Speakers, and then the key moment, I suppose, is the pledge of office from the First and Deputy First Speakers. Mark, the Deputy Speakers now, just to remind us who we're going to see.
We're expecting to see here Francie Molloy, who was the Deputy Speaker, but he resigned his position in order to be elected alongside the others. We think the Ulster Unionist choice is David McClarty, who's their former Chief Whip, and we're expecting from the SDLP, Alban McGuinness. Here we are.
Gogarjahas, August Capam, Bawalliam Capam, Francie Molloy, Marlas, Con Corla, August Bawalliam, couple of Focal. Ara Fast of we Francie. First of all, congratulations, Mr. Speaker, on your elevation to this post. And I want to nominate Francie Molloy for the position of Deputy Speaker. And I could just say a few words. He, like you, is also stout. He is an Armagh man who represents Tyrone. And it's a good pleasure for me. He has been around our struggle since the very early days of the civil rights struggle. It's my great pleasure to nominate him for that position. And if I could just pray your indulgence, I just want to extend condolences to our member from Fermanagh South Tyrone, Jerry McHugh, who is this morning at his father's funeral and isn't here with us today. Gora Margaret.
Okay, do we have a seconder for Mr. Molloy?
I second that proposal.
Mr. Molloy, do you accept the nomination to be Deputy Speaker?
I accept the position.
Is there any further proposals, Sir Ed Jampy?
Mr. Speaker, perhaps I beg your indulgence for one moment to, on behalf of my colleagues, to congratulate you. Your seconder described you as a stout defender. We shall describe you as a robust defender, we hope, of our interests, of the interests of the members in this Assembly. May I now propose the name of Mr. David McClarty, member for the East Londonderry constituency, for the office of Deputy Speaker. Mr. McClarty has extensive experience on our Business Committee here, and I believe he'd be eminently suitable to hold this office of Deputy Speaker. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for Mr. McClarty?
Mr. Speaker, it's with much pleasure that I endorse the nomination of Mr. McClarty, and I now move that his name be accepted.
Well, Danny Kennedy there seconding the nomination of David McClarty. Mark, that was part of the agreement that David McClarty would be the Ulster Unionist nomination. He's accepting it there?
Yeah, David McClarty, as I say, former Chief Whip there, accepting the Ulster Unionist nomination. We now hear from the SDLP.
Further proposals?
Mr. Speaker, may I join with other leaders in congratulating you as the first directly elected Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly. We have worked well as constituency colleagues, but I know that will stand me no favour from the chair whenever I am out of line. And I know that you have been a very solid representative of the Foyle constituency and served Derry City Council very well as chair. I want to nominate John Dallett, another Assembly member from East Derry, as there's going to be.
Go on, say it.
Shares for Weight Watchers are going to be going up here at a very fast rate after this morning's procedures. I want to nominate John Dallett, another MLA for the East Derry constituency, to serve as Deputy Speaker. He is someone who has served with distinction in the last Assembly, has a solid record of service in local government, and has given very proud service to this entire community.
For Mr. Dallett.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to second John Dallett.
It will doubtless come as a great relief to the House that I do not propose to make any nomination of Deputy Speaker at this time. However, feeling svelte and enthusiastic after my exercise around the streets of Belfast yesterday.
David Ford speaking there, but a slight surprise. We had predicted Alban McGuinness, Mark Devonport.
Well, yeah, I'm slightly surprised. Alban McGuinness had previously told me he was only interested in the speakership, not the deputy speakership. But just over the last couple of days, there were some reports that he would be their nomination. But John Dallett, who was a formidable member of the Public Accounts Committee, has emerged as the SDLP choice for deputy speaker.
And lots of jokes there about the size of the various ministers. Stout, robust, solid, the different adjectives used to describe Willie Hay. But now I suppose we move to the meat of today's proceedings. That, Mark, is the pledge of office by the First and Deputy First Minister.
Yes, we now come on to the pledge of office.
If there are no further proposals,
we will have first of all the election, I presume.
I have had no member indicating to me that they want to speak as well in this debate. The question is that Mr. Francie Brawley, or Mr. Malloy, sorry, very close, be Deputy Speaker of this Assembly. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, if any, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. As there are ayes from all sides of the House and there are no dissenting voices, I am satisfied that cross-committee support has been demonstrated. The question is that Mr. David McClarty be Deputy Speaker of this Assembly. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, if any, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. As there are ayes from all sides of the House and there are no dissenting voice, I am satisfied that the cross-committee support has been demonstrated. I formally declare that Mr. David McClarty has been elected as Deputy Speaker of this Assembly. The question is that Mr John Dallett be Deputy Speaker of this Assembly. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary of any, no. The ayes have it. As there are ayes from all sides of the House and there are no dissenting voices, I am satisfied that cross-community support has been demonstrated. I formally declare that Mr John Dallett has been elected as a Deputy Speaker.
We now have a speaker team in place, Jim, which represents all the four main parties and no alliance speaker, which wasn't the pattern previously.
In terms of the pledge of office for First Minister designate
Willie Hay now moving to this pledge of office.
In a letter dated the 3rd of May, the Secretary of State advised the former Speaker that he had received official confirmation from both Dr Paisley and Mr McGuinness that they had accepted their party's nominees to be the First Minister and Deputy First Minister, respectively. Members will be aware that the legislation provides that the persons nominated shall not take up office until each of them has affirmed the terms of the pledge of office contained in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998. Before we proceed, members may find it helpful if the pledge of office is read into the record so that it does not have to be read in full by the First Minister designate, the Deputy First Minister designate, or by other ministers as they take up office. Clerk, please read the pledge.
The pledge of office is as follows: to pledge to discharge in good faith all the duties of office, commitment to non-violence and exclusively peaceful and democratic means, to serve all the people of Northern Ireland equally, and to act in accordance with the general obligations on government, to promote equality and prevent discrimination, to promote the interests of the whole community represented in the Northern Ireland Assembly towards the goal of a shared future, to participate fully in the Executive Committee, the North-South Ministerial Council and the British-Irish Council, to observe the joint nature of the offices of First Minister and Deputy First Minister, to uphold the rule of law based as it is on the fundamental principles of fairness, impartiality and democratic accountability, including support for policing and the courts as set out in paragraph 6 of the St Andrews Agreement, to participate with colleagues in the preparation of a programme for government, to operate within the framework of that programme when agreed within the Executive Committee and endorsed by the Assembly, to support and act in accordance with all decisions of the Executive Committee and Assembly, to comply with the Ministerial Code of Conduct. Paragraph 6 of the St Andrews Agreement says, "We believe that the essential elements of support for law and order include endorsing fully the police service of Northern Ireland and the criminal justice system, actively encouraging everyone in the community to cooperate fully with the PSNI in tackling crime in all areas and actively supporting all the policing and criminal justice institutions, including the Policing Board."
Members, the pledge of office has now been read into the record of proceedings. I will shortly ask the Right Honourable Dr Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness to affirm the terms of the pledge of office. Dr Paisley.
I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
I now ask Martin McGuinness, as Deputy First Minister designate, to make the affirmation in the form prescribed. Mr McGuinness.
Glacam Limodge na Huffig. I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act of 1998.
I now confirm that the Right Honourable Dr Ian Paisley and Mr Martin McGuinness has affirmed the terms of the pledge of office, having taken up office as First Minister and Deputy First Minister in accordance with the Northern Ireland St Andrews Agreement Act 2006. Members, we will now move to the next item of business appearing on the order paper. And could I say something at this stage
Well, that now the pledge of office has been taken by the First and Deputy First Minister. A significant moment, Mark, considering that it includes this support for upholding the rule of law and support for policing in the courts.
Absolutely, that was an affirmation that Martin McGuinness could not have made before the Sinn Féin Special Ardèche on policing, but is now able to go ahead and affirm his support for policing the courts in that pledge read out actually by the Deputy Clerk, Joe Reynolds.
And Willie Hay will now move to the appointment of the ministers. This has already, of course, all been agreed between the parties, so it should move fairly smoothly. We know who they will be, but of course formally they have to now assume office.
Yes, this will allow them to assume office. In previous assemblies we've had a guessing game wondering which party is going to opt for which ministry. We now know that Peter Robinson will be the first pick for Finance Ministry, and then they will go on through the various picks in the way that was worked out informally between the parties so that the politicians could read themselves into their briefs during this sort of period that we've had in between March the 26th and now.
And of course sitting in the gallery at the moment are Prime Minister Tony Blair and the Taoiseach Bertie Ahern, the American delegation of guests, all there to see Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness assume office, and indeed the coalition now of the big parties take the ministerial posts. So let's just see how it unfolds.
Dr. Paisley.
Mr. Speaker, I select Finance and Personnel portfolio and nominate Mr. Peter Robinson to hold it.
Will Mr. Peter Robinson confirm that he is willing to take up office and affirm the terms of pledge of office?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I am willing to take up the office of Minister for Finance and Personnel, and I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Mr. Robinson is now Minister of Finance and Personnel. I now call on Mr. Gerry Adams to select the ministerial office and nominate a person to hold it. Mr. Adams.
Captain Katrina Ruan, Banas Mayo, Mar Ira Educus. I want to nominate Katrina Ruan as the Minister for Education. Thank you.
Will Mrs. Katrina Ruan confirm that she is willing to take up office and affirm the terms of the pledge of office?
Kincha, tá mé talchinach glacú le hifig ara an Educus, agus jarvium mód na hifiga mar lagdrama I skedal cahar dacht hushkert na hern milanigade nochus a hocht. Yes, I am willing to take up the office of Minister for Education, and I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Mrs. Katrina Ruan is now Minister of Education. I now call on the Right Honourable Dr. Ian Paisley to select a ministerial office and nominate a person to hold it. Dr. Paisley.
I select the portfolio of Enterprise, Trade and Investment and nominate Mr. Nigel Dodds to hold it.
Will Mr. Nigel Dodds confirm that he is willing to take office and affirm the terms of the pledge of office?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I am willing to take up the office of Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Investment, and I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Mr. Nigel Dodds is now Minister of Enterprise, Trade and Investment. I now call on Sir Ed Jampey to select the ministerial office and nominate a person to hold it. Mr. Jampey.
Mr. Speaker, I select the Department of Health, Social Services and Public Safety, and I nominate Michael McGimpsey to hold the office.
Will Mr. Michael McGimpsey confirm that he is willing to take up office and affirm the terms of the pledge of office? Mr. McGimpsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of Minister for Health, Social Services and Public Safety, and I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Mr. Michael McGimpsey is now Minister of Health, Social Services and Public Safety. I now call on Mr. Mark Durkin to select the ministerial office and nominate a person to hold it. Mr. Durkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I select the Department of Social Development, and it gives me great pleasure to nominate Margaret Ritchie as Minister.
Will Ms. Margaret Ritchie confirm that she is willing to take up the office and affirm the terms of the pledge of office?
Mr Speaker, yes, I am willing to take up the office of Minister for Social Development, and I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Ms Margaret Ritchie is now Minister for Social Development. I now call on Mr Gerry Adams to select a ministerial office and nominate a person to hold it. Mr Adams.
Captain Conor Murphy, Faras Ardwaha, Mar Ira Fobert Unta. I want to nominate Conor Murphy as the Minister for Regional Development. Thank you.
Will Mr Conor Murphy confirm that he is willing to take up office and affirm the terms of the pledge of office? Mr Murphy.
Kinse Can Corla, Tommy Tulchinach, Relation Office Shaw. Yes, Can Corla, I am willing to take up the office of Minister for Regional Development, and I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Mr Conor Murphy is now Minister for Regional Development. I now call on the Right Honourable Dr Ian Paisley to select a ministerial office and nominate a person to hold it. Dr Paisley.
I select the Environment portfolio and nominate Mrs Arlene Foster to hold it.
Will Mrs Arlene Foster confirm that she is willing to take up office and affirm the terms of the pledge of office? Mrs Foster.
Yes, Mr Speaker, I am willing to take up the office of Minister for the Environment, and I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Mrs Eileen Foster is now Minister of the Environment. I now call on Mr Gerry Adams to select a ministerial office and nominate a person to hold it. Mr Adams.
Concordia, Captain Michelle Gildernew, Vanas Chiron, August Neil Sayer Inner, Mar Ira Tailwayacht, August Fobert Tuha. I thank you, Mr Speaker, and I want to nominate a Tyrone woman who's not on her own, Michelle Gildernew, as the Minister for Agriculture and Rural Development.
Will Mrs Michelle Gildernew confirm that she is willing to take up office and affirm the terms of the pledge of office?
Kinse Tamé Tulchinach Glacu Leishan Offic Shaw. Yes, I am willing to take up the office of Minister for Agriculture and Rural Development, and I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Mrs Michelle Gildernew is now Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. I now call on the Right Honourable Dr Ian Paisley to select a ministerial office and nominate a person to hold it. Dr Paisley.
I select the Culture, Arts and Leisure portfolio and nominate Mr Edwin Poots to hold it.
Will Mr Edwin Poots confirm that he is willing to take up office and affirm the terms of the pledge of office?
Yes, Mr Speaker, I am willing to take up the office of Minister for Culture, Arts and Leisure, and I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Mr Edmund Poots is now Minister of Culture, Arts and Leisure. I now call on Sir Reg MP to select a ministerial office and nominate a person to hold it.
Mr Speaker, I select the Department of Employment and Learning, and I nominate Reg MP for that post. I am prepared to accept the office, and I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Will you now confirm that you are willing to take up office? Sorry, apologise. I'm going to ask you to do it again, Sir Reg. Sir Reg MP is now Minister of Employment and Learning. Thank you. That concludes the process for the appointment of ministers to each of the departments. I have received correspondence from the First Minister and Deputy First Minister in relation to the appointment of junior ministers, and I will read the letter. Present to the procedure for the appointment of junior ministers specified in paragraph 3.1 of the former First Ministers and Deputy First Ministers' determination on the 8th of December 1999, as approved by the Assembly on the 14th of December 1999. The First Minister and Deputy First Minister have appointed Mr Ian Paisley Jr MLA, Mr Jerry Kelly MLA to the post of Junior Minister. A copy of the letters of appointment are attached. Will Mr Ian Paisley Jr affirm the terms of the pledge of office?
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and congratulations to you in your post. And I willingly affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Mr Paisley is now a Junior Minister. Will Mr Jelly Kelly affirm the terms of the pledge of office?
Kincha Tommy Chilchina Glagu Le Hofig Mar Ira Susharat, Os Darmium Jeremy, Midna Hofiga, Mar Elector Amat is schedule Kaffer, Dat Tushart Ahern, Ni Jagnacha Ahut. I affirm the terms of the pledge of office as set out in Schedule 4 to the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
Mr Kelly is now a Junior Minister. May I offer my congratulations to all those appointed to ministerial office. Members, we will now move to the next item of business appearing on the order paper. Item 7 on the order paper is the motion on the Business Committee. Clerk, please read them.
So all the ministers have now taken their appointments, pledged themselves to the pledge of office. All went as planned there, Mark. A slight embarrassment for Sir Reg MP, given their party squabbles about who should take posts, that he almost had to, he had to first affirm himself and then secondly almost second himself.
Yes, I couldn't see in the chamber what expression was on the face of Alan McFarland, who had what became, what was a private row, which became a public row between the two men about whether the party leader should take his own job. But yeah, it was quite amusing that Willie Hay nearly asked him to do it twice over after he had already accepted it. Willie Hay also, he's doing pretty well in his first outing as Speaker, but at one point he very nearly accidentally got Francie Brolly elected as Deputy Speaker rather than Francie Malloy, but otherwise he's come through glitch-free.
Glitch-free, and with me in the studio is, we have Mary Lou MacDonald, who's National Chairperson for Sinn Féin and of course an MEP. You're very welcome. You're able to sit here and watch it while your party members are inside. A Junior Ministry for Jerry Kelly and of course your other ministers now in post too. What sort of a day is this for Sinn Féin?
Well, I mean, it's a great day. It's obviously a momentous day, not just for Sinn Féin or for any of the individual parties, but this represents now a real opportunity for all of us. Obviously, in the first instance, in the north of Ireland, we have huge challenges that we face, but equally in terms of the All-Ireland Ministerial Council, we've a very substantial job of work to do across the island. So it's a moment of hope and very great optimism, and of course I'm delighted to see my colleagues now in ministerial position.
And indeed the Assembly has now just adjourned. It'll be a few minutes, Mark, before we move on to the next kind of ceremonial proceedings. Of course the Prime Ministers will be departing the gallery at the moment to meet the new Prime Ministers, if you like, of Northern Ireland, Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness, for a cup of tea.
Yes, there's due to be a cup of tea, I think, in the First Minister's office, and then they will make their way to the Great Hall, where there is entertainment from this group of young adults with special needs. The sky's the limit. They'll be entertaining the MLAs and their guests here, and then we're expecting the two Prime Ministers, joined with the First and Deputy First Ministers, to make their way down the stairs to a special staging area that's been set up there, and speak to the rest of us. Here we see some of the MLAs coming out. That's Kieran McCarthy and Sean Neeson from the Alliance there. I think David Hilditch as well with them. I can see Bob Coulter behind, and they're just being congratulated, I think, by Andrew McKinley, a Labour backbencher who's taken a long-term interest in Northern Ireland.
Well spotted, and there of course we see them now. This must be the First Minister's office?
This is the First Minister's office. We see the ever-present Stephen Grimmerson, who's a spin doctor for the Executive, Ian Paisley Jr., the new Junior Minister. Whether that makes him Junior, I don't know, but yes, they're just taking up position now. Here's Leslie Cree there, David Burnside alongside Tom Elliott of the Ulster Unison just behind there. We see Dawn Purvis, the PUP leader, talking to the only Green member of the Assembly, Brian Wilson for North Down, behind some SDLP Alliance and Ulster Unionist members just making their way out.
The humour, Mary Lou MacDonald, of course, between the two top ministers, if you like, has been pretty good. I don't think they're serving up potato bread here. I don't even know if it's green tea or orange juice, but no doubt they'll be enjoying perhaps a relaxing moment.
I'm sure whatever it is that it will be consumed with relish, and I'm sure everybody from all sides are enjoying the very considerable achievement that today represents.
There goes Martin McGuinness, the Deputy First Minister, making his way into office.
And it's just to prove the point, I suppose, that he can wander in and out of Ian Paisley's office whenever he wants.
Indeed, yes, yeah. And they're looking for their seats. As you were saying in an earlier joint news conference, Jim, which the two men had with Jose Manuel Barroso of the EU, Ian Paisley joked about serving his guests a feast of fudge, which is, of course, potato bread. And he said that if the EU diplomat didn't eat it all, then the deputy would gobble it all up. Martin McGuinness said that he didn't think he'd be engaging in that in case it gave him a heart attack, actually. But I imagine that it's tea and bickies more likely on the menu now for the two Prime Ministers, who'll be, I imagine, just being shown down the stairs at the moment from the gallery. And
the two men are rehearsing their positions. Maybe they're going to meet them outside. Dermot Nesbitt, you of course probably spent a bit of time in that office when you were working as a junior minister yourself in the OFDFM's office. I suppose you never expected to see Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness occupying it.
No, indeed. In fact, that's the room Brian Faulkner was in for the last time. It's a very historic room, that in the corner of Parliament Building, Stormont, and yes, I was in it very often, both as Junior Minister and as Environment Minister. I think what is remarkable is not that the deal is done, but is that the jovial nature in which they engage with one another. One could even see there, without the words, Ian Paisley was completely relaxed in the company of Martin McGuinness, and I think that's something that has taken all by storm in a sense, not just simply working together. When Ian Paisley said it would stick in his gut to actually work with Sinn Féin, I don't see too much sticking in his gut to have to do what he just did there a moment ago.
Well, you seem rather disappointed, but you mentioned...
No, not at all disappointed. As I say, mixed feelings at the very outset when you asked me this morning. Very glad for Northern Ireland that we're now moving into a 21st century where we govern ourselves by people elected by ourselves. It is just tragic. And I listened to a lady from the RUC Widows this morning in the radio, that, you know, so many people have died that needlessly died. This could have been done many, many more years previously.
You indeed were Brian Faulkner's election agent at one time. There was, just to talk about the choreography of all of this, at one stage we thought we might be getting a shot from the balcony with the premiers and the First and Deputy First Ministers there. Now that hasn't been on offer today. I wonder whether people thought it might just be too reminiscent of times past.
Yes, when Lady Lucy Faulkner was sitting watching what her late husband Brian Faulkner was doing at that time, when as they were called Chief Executive then, the Deputy Chief Executive was Gerry Fitt, who was a socialist first and a nationalist, and perhaps wishing for an All-Ireland down the line, but they were two men with integrity who worked together.
Well, we can see now that there's Tony Blair and Ian Paisley now, and Bertie Ahern, Peter Hain, they're all in the room for their tea and biscuits. And Mark, just again to talk about the choreography today, we didn't actually see shots of the premiers in the visitors' gallery. That was a bit of a hiccup too.
Well, I think that there was a general sense that, they're all squeezing together there on that tea. I thought Peter Hain was going to be without a chair cozy for a while, yes. I think there was a general sense that normally there isn't cameras in parliamentary galleries. Generally there's been a rule against it in order to ensure there aren't protests and the cameras, the parliamentary proceedings are meant to focus on the floor. And so I think that was maybe the reason why. But as we see here, everything all smiles, lots of dark suits there in a row, but very happy times for the Prime Ministers and the Secretary of State, passing the baton on to the First and Deputy First Ministers.
So, only this, had you a good journey over?
Yeah, it was fine. It's very good. And windy enough morning.
You're in the midst of battles.
Ah, sure.
Oh, that's right.
Campaigning.
We're only too glad to bring a bit of stability.
I appreciate
it. Only write that down.
But it passed off very nicely.
It passed off. I was glad to see the business-like way, because there's been so much despising of this by the press and radio programs and all. It's nice to see it was done with dignity and it was done correctly, and it was good.
Willie Hay is the Speaker. He's going to be the Speaker. He seemed to be good and...
Oh, yes, always, yeah. He did a very good job in policing, doing the police. So he's on the police board, and he took over a tough job in one of their committees. And I mean, that's the place where the dust is bound to rise. And he did it very well. I mean, even his opponent said too.
Yeah.
And he's a remarkable man because he contested the seat that is the old seat of all the dignitaries and nationalism, and he topped the poll. That's Mark Dermot. He had more votes than Mark Dermot. So that was really an amazing thing. But it was all covered up in the election. It was nobody seemed to take that. But I mean, in a seat that's nationalist for a unionist candidate to top the poll is amazing. Even I never tried that.
So you're reading in with the briefs and preparing for it and everything else. That's good.
When you're going out as a young man, I'm coming in like an Ireland.
I should maybe have learned a lesson from you. Just kept going until I was 80.
Well, I know you'll miss your talks with me.
Well, actually, I will. As a matter of fact, I'll certainly. But it's a funny thing. But even at the most difficult periods, I've always found people personally very friendly here. You know.
Well, I wonder why people hate me, because I'm such a nice man.
So what do we? We're going to go through and have
we're going to go for a walk just around the building till you come to the place where you all speak. And there's no chairman at all. I'll speak first, and my deputy will speak second, and then you can arrange with the Prime Minister, and then the guest from the south. Well, not by mind, we just do that. Yeah. And then we go down. We have a choir of young people from an aided school. All the advantages of the way.
Well, it's earwigging there on the little conversation.
The sound was pretty good whilst it was going, as Tony Blair, Ian Paisley talked about the fact that Tony Blair was going to depart, so later this week Tony Blair didn't seek to dissuade him of that notion, but said, I should have learned a lesson from you, I should have hung on till I was 80, which would certainly be something so far as London was concerned if he announced that he'd decided anew. Here we see the guests gathering in the Great Hall. Another good one-liner there from Ian Paisley was when he said, I wonder why people hate me so much, because I'm such a nice man.
Plenty of laughs all round, and indeed there was that slight uncomfortableness the way. No, Tony Blair has been referred to as a vicar, and there he was sitting there with the moderator of the Free Presbyterian Church, all having a cup of tea. And there's
the Paisley family. There's Eileen, now Baroness Paisley,
and that's Rhonda Paisley beside her, I think. Yes, and of course her brother Ian Jr., now a junior minister to his father. The other members of the Assembly and guests are crowded in there to see the speeches that will take place, and indeed there will be some entertainment too. Ian Paisley was referring it to there from a group called Sky's the Limit.
Albert Reynolds, the former Irish Prime Minister, of course played a major role in the earlier days of the peace process.
John Hume, I think, is there too.
Chatting, yeah.
And Gerry Adams, of course. Centre stage today, but of course it'll be Martin McGuinness who'll be taken to the podium to speak. That's Martin McGuinness's mother, Peggy, there, and John Reid, who himself has announced that he will be bowing out of politics soon enough, but a former Secretary of State, and obviously
congratulating the Paisley family there on the day.
And Mr. Reid, of course, was rumoured to have been quite involved in this process, even up to date.
Well, it caused a little bit of consternation because at the time just before we had the March the 26th deal, it was rumoured that John Reid had said to the DUP that the deadline didn't matter so much as long as they did it during Tony Blair's period in Downing Street. Subsequently, the DUP clarified that hadn't actually happened the immediate vicinity of the sort of March the 26th deal, and that John Reid hadn't stepped on Peter Hain's toes. But it does seem that maybe somebody had a word with someone in the corridors at Westminster, which maybe emboldened the DUP to think that they could push through that March the 26th deadline, as they indeed then were able to do by pushing things towards May the 8th.
Yeah, as we can see there is that some Sean Neeson and Mary Lou MacDonald. It is quite a party atmosphere out there at the moment. Is it going to last though?
Well, look, there are going to be points of clear difference in policy terms between parties and the executive, and nobody, I think, is naive enough to imagine that it'll all be plain sailing. We'll have our differences, but the important thing is that we get through those, and that we prove yet again that politics works, that there is a process, a democratic process through which every part of our community and society can express itself and have its needs and aspirations met. But will we have difficult times? Of course we will. But I think today that the party atmosphere is entirely appropriate, because this is now the beginning of a new era. I'm always very reluctant to herald things as historic or to use all of those cliches, but today it's more than a cliche, it really is the reality.
But does it surprise you, the warmth perhaps of the relationships?
I'll tell you, when we did that first initial meeting with the DUP delegation headed by Dr. Paisley, yes, some of us were quite taken with the fact that it was so frank and forthright and courteous and friendly. And certainly we would recognise that there are very able and talented people within the DUP. Equally, our people are very talented, as are others from the other parties. We've a huge job of work to do, and you see, I think that's what dominates all else. There's so much that needs to be done economically, socially, in education, in agriculture, and you have there a team of people who are more than capable of meeting those challenges. So yes, we'll have our differences. I'm sure there'll be many a barney and banter across the table, but the important thing is to get the job done.
Dermot Nesbitt.
I was at a wedding on Saturday in Scotland of my nephew, and I don't want to take away from it. It was a wonderful occasion. This is a bit like a marriage as well. Well, it is a marriage. Joined at the hip, and everyone's euphoric there. They're now waiting for the speeches, and then there's the dinner after that, just like a wedding. But as in reality, after the wedding comes the working together in partnership, and that will be difficult. Because
well, it's the honeymoon first of all, surely. How long does that last?
Well, they've maybe had the honeymoon in a sense for 6 weeks, and maybe there's a bit like modern life as well. You maybe have the honeymoon and then the official marriage after that. But we're not going to that sort of modern way of living. But there we have it. They're showing signs there of being nice to one another. But in the end of the day, it will be the hard decisions that have to be taken. Where, for example, will we have selection at 11 plus, or will we not? Will we close down some of the schools? There's too many schooling buildings in Northern Ireland. That's just education, never mind health, roads and all of this. They will be hard decisions where ministers will have to make decisions whether or not they get enough money from the Chancellor. Aidan Paisley at one time did say that was a break point in whether or not he went into government. I think he's now in government without having got that which he wished for. And therefore, if we don't get enough money, they're going to have to make very, very hard decisions. And that will be the reality of politics. But that should make it all the more beneficial to the man and woman in the street, that they can go to their local MLA who can touch base immediately with their minister, who makes it more directly accountable. And that's what I found when I was in the government in Northern Ireland. You had a great feeling of accountability. And by that feeling, I mean a feeling of concern that every 2 or 3 weeks you had to stand up in that assembly chamber and for half an hour give full account for your ministerial position. I note the pledge of office they signed, that each minister had to act in accordance with the decisions of the Assembly and the Executive. That was in the previous Ministerial Code of Conduct as well. What we now have it is more embedded in legislation.
Well, and of course, Mark, a lot's been made, I suppose, of the differences between Aidan Paisley and Martin McGuinness, but I'm just looking back, another historical note. On the 6th of May 1969, the then Prime Minister, Chichester Clark, announced an amnesty for all offences associated with demonstrations since the 5th of October 68. That resulted in the release from prison of, among others, Aidan Paisley.
Yeah, and it's certainly been a complete turnaround. There's Senator Ted Kennedy, who's heading up the US delegation. There's been a complete turnaround in Ian Paisley's life because he has for so many decades been the ultimate protest politician. He's been a man who has gone to jail as part of various protests about the Anglo-Irish Agreement, going back much further. He's been the man always on the outside, and so the experiment now for Ian Paisley at the age of 81 is how will he do being the man on the inside with the power instead of the man railing from the outside. And this is going to be a real test for him. And now some people did think that he was just going to do this for a matter of months before handing over to Peter Robinson, but he made it clear in an interview he did during this period that he intends to serve out the full 4-year term of office. So how will he do in terms of handling that detail, and how will he do on the minutiae, because he is 81. Will he want to be across all the minutiae, or will he delegate a lot of the essential decision making to people like his son, Ian Paisley Jr., who's there in the office of the Deputy First Minister, and also obviously to his Deputy Leader and Finance Minister Peter Robinson.
And quite a throng assembled there. I think we'll soon have the Sky's the Limit entertainment will begin. We saw Senator Ted Kennedy there a moment ago, and indeed his sister Jean Kennedy Smith, but perhaps we could hear what Willie Hay is now saying to the assembled throng.
We would like to welcome you here today for what is truly a historic gathering. In a little while we will be addressed by the First Minister, Deputy First Minister and also the Prime Minister in Seathig. But first I want to introduce you to some wonderful young people who are called the Sky's the Limit. Given what is happening here today, I don't think they could have a better name. I have no doubt you will enjoy what they have in store for us. Ladies and gentlemen, Sky's the Limit.